Hey, welcome back. So today we're going to continue working on this sliding door, get it unwrapped, get it finished. So I'm just going to go into rendered mode, I think, for this, or we might go into loop dev mode for it. Doesn't really matter too much. We're going into rendered mode. What I want to do is I want to separate this out. I want to add a few edges in to help us unwrap it so that it matches more like the reference. I can kind of see like a little seam down here, and the same at the top. So I'm going to assume that the uprights go all the way from the top to the bottom, and then these inside bits are separate pieces of wood. And that's the way I'm going to unwrap it so that I can have the grain running correctly on the texture. So let's grab this, go to edit mode. I'm going to separate off the doors first of all. So I'm going to select one door, separate that off. I'm going to select the second door. I'm actually just going to delete those faces. And this last one, I'm going to take that and I'm going to delete that as well because we only really need these two parts. Okay, first of all, what I want to do is I want to just tweak this a little bit. So I want to make these edges a little bit wider, or what I should say is I want to make these uprights here a little bit wider to match this center part. So I'm going to scale these in X and scale them down a little bit. I'm just going to estimate this, but I think that's more or less about the same. The width at the bottom I think is pretty okay. I think I might move it up just a little bit. Again, as I've said throughout this, I'm just doing all this by eye. There's no real accuracy in this. Just kind of guessing everything. I'm going to move this up, snap it to here, so we get the same thing. Make these a little bit wider as well, scaling in X only. Okay, that's fine. Now I want to be able to create some edges to unwrap this correctly as 4 separate planks of wood. The way I'm going to do this is add in an edge loop here, add in an edge loop here, Control R, select them both, bevel them both, and I'm going to bevel them until they get to this point where you can see that face. If you look in the top left or the top right, you can see that we have this little normal pointing down, and then we get this certain point and then it points up. We want it just on the point where it starts to point in a different direction. That tells us that these verts are right on top of each other. Okay, so we want to also do it in the middle, and the reason for that is it will just give us some nice little quads. Not that we need quads particularly. What we want to do is scale this in Z. I'm going to bevel this out. I'm going to do the same with this. Now it looks like these are a little bit off, so I'm going to get the bottom ones in place. Then we'll grab the top ones. Now this won't be like super accurate, but it'll be pretty close. I'll just grab those and snap those into place. I'm going to grab a bunch of these edges here. I'm just wondering, do we have a solidify on this? No, we don't. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to grab edge loops on these diagonal ones because we're going to get rid of these. Now, what we don't want to do is get rid of this one, so we're going to hit X. I'm going to do a limited dissolve on that. And you can see we only really remove the edges that we don't need. I'm going to select all, verts, all M, merge at distance. Now it says we're removing 4 verts. I think it should be more than that, so I'm going to snap this up a little bit. Okay, so that's 16 verts we're removing. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. All the additional verts that we need in there, I think that's what that is. So there we go. We have our frame built the way we could have built it in the first place if we didn't use insets, but I actually find using insets to be quite a fair bit quicker. I'm going to use the same process on this part. I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to watch it all. Okay, so that's that part done now. Now we can go on to unwrapping this. So as I said, we're going to have seams running along here. So I'm just going to grab this edge all the way around, and I'm going to grab this inner corner. And we want to do that for basically all these uprights to make sure we only get the ones that we actually want. There we go. So I'm going to mark seams there. Since this is on the outside, I'm also going to mark seams on the outside of this. So we're going to grab one edge here. We only need one edge on this. Mark a seam. We're going to grab this outside edge here. Mark a seam. Let's see, what else do we need to do? We need to get the top panel of it as well. So we already have a seam there, so we'll just grab here. In fact, I think I want to keep that part. So let's mark a seam here and do the same on the bottom. So let's get this middle part kind of seamed out. Again, mark a seam. And we'll put the seam for this part in here. So I'm thinking about how this wraps out. This is going to be one side of it. It's going to wrap all the way around here. And then the top is going to be kind of flapping off. So we need to put an edge on the top here. I'm just going to mark that edge all the way along, because we will need it for the other part as well. Now it might be a little bit confusing. Why am I marking a seam here and not here, etc. It just comes down to experience, just knowing how to unwrap certain shapes. Really, essentially, it's just practice, knowing how to do this. You get a feel for it, you get a feel for knowing where you want your seams, which way to unwrap an object, so you get the fewest number of islands possible. And yeah, it's just experience, really. So mark a seam here, and we're going to do the inside here. So we did the outside of this one last time, so we'll do the outside of this again. Okay, now if we go into UV layout, hopefully we've got a good unwrap here, so let's hit unwrap. Okay, so it's not too bad. We've missed one area here. So you can see the reason this part is not unwrapped correctly is because instead of having this split here, we've actually still got that selected. So we're going to select that. And what we want to do is we want to separate that out. Now, if we click on this mode here, where we have these two arrows, it actually lets us use edge mode. So we can actually click on an edge and we should be able to split this. Let's see if we have an option for splitting this in here. Or maybe we actually have to just do this over here. We have it selected there, so we'll just hit U. Select all, hit U, and unwrap that again. And let's look. And that's actually fixed it so well that we've ended up using the entire UV space for that, which is pretty good. But one thing we don't want to do is we don't want some of these objects running horizontal and some vertical. So I'm just going to grab a bunch of these. I'm going to rotate these 90 degrees. Now, it doesn't matter if we have overlapping geometry here. It doesn't even matter if it doesn't match the UVs. All we're doing is unwrapping it so we don't have any problems with texture stretching. As you can see here, our texture is running the opposite way that we want it. So instead of using the window wood texture, we're going to use the window wood vert texture, which is the one that's rotated 90 degrees, and it should be fixed. Let's have a look. No, it's not fixed. Let's try window wood again. Okay, so that's a little bit strange. It appears that one of our window wood textures, although it's this popped up in one of the previous videos. It's because we're in textured mode and not in rendered mode. So it is window wood vert that we should be in. You can see that that's actually fixed that now. You can see that we have our edges where they should be. And it was just because in this mode, it doesn't take into account rotating and things like that on your textures. That's why you should always be in dev mode. That's just a wee mistake I made. There we go. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with this door, and I'll speed that process up so you don't have to watch it. Okay, so that process is done now, so now we can look at this and check our texture. And again, we have to change that texture over to the vert version. We will isolate and unisolate, and we should have this the way it's supposed to be. You can see we still have that strange kind of texture on these windows here with the refraction and things like that, but that's okay. We might adjust this a little bit actually now. We should put this in the middle of the frame, the glass itself I should say. Now the glass itself looks as if it has a thickness modifier on it that's actually too thick. We only want that glass to be very minimally thick. In fact, we could probably actually get away with not having any thickness on that glass. There's not really any need to have thickness on that glass in Eevee. Okay, so that's that done. I'm going to grab this window, or actually this is a sliding door, and I'm going to actually move it off to the side. I have to move the glass as well. We'll actually have to separate that glass and do a separate model for that. And now I'm just going to create a nice little bevel around this. Now, you might be wondering why I beveled this before, or why I unwrapped before I did this bevel. And it's really just because this bevel is not really going to affect the unwrapping that much. So, make this in a slightly bigger window. I'm going to bevel this just a little bit. And I'm going to go into the bevel settings. I'm going to click on custom profile here. And I'm going to show you a little tip. I'm going to add in 2 of these little dots, and I'm going to add in another one. Just going to add in kind of custom little bevel. Add a few segments in here, and just have a look at this. And you can see that I actually have a slightly fancier bevel. I'm going to move this up a little bit, and you can see that actually just adjusts as I go along. Now I have this little kind of interesting profile in here. And that just gives a little bit extra to this model really. So I want to go to object mode. We'll shade smooth this, and we'll also add in our normals, all smooth. We'll add a modifier onto this, bevel modifier. Segments to, let's see, snap by angle, offset, not too much. And you can see we have a nice little bevel there. That's going to pick up a nice little highlight, and just going to kind of trick anyone looking at this into thinking that we've did a little bit more work than we have there. I'm going to do the same thing on this. So I'm going to select all those edges all the way around. Now we seem to be slightly missing some of these edges here. Now, because we've got seams in there, the edge loop doesn't seem to be working the way it usually should. We're having to select all these edges instead of getting an edge loop. Actually, I think it's because of these edges going across here and up and down that we're not getting all those edges in one grab, but that's okay. So again, I'm going to do that bevel, same bevel again. There we go. Select. Let's just fix that glass very quickly. So I'm just going to isolate this. Edit mode, we can grab this one and this one. Going to move this forward a little bit. We should probably actually unisolate so we can move it to where it's supposed to be. Okay, so I'll move it to there. And this one. And this one will move to, see about there. Let's move this one so it's lined up. Actually, this one should be lined up with this one. These two should be lined up with these ones. In actual fact, what we'll do is we'll just delete off those faces. So it'll actually be a little bit easier. Separate that by selection, object mode. Okay, so now we want to grab this and this. We're going to Alt D to duplicate those. I'm going to move these down to the end. We'll fix the distance in a little moment. Alt D, duplicate that again, and move this. So let's look at this. Snap these shut more or less. Grab this, and again snap this. We want that just overlapping slightly. And the same with this one, we'll want this overlapping slightly as well. If you look at this from the inside, should be pretty clear that we have two sliding doors and something else next to it. Looking at the reference here, I don't see any kind of skirting here, but it does look as if the door kind of floats just a little bit above the surface. So I'm just going to scale this in Z very, very slightly. Shouldn't really scale in object mode, but in this case, a little exception. What I will do is I'll move this down in Z and just get it right onto the surface. That just makes things a little bit better. So just a little bit of work today on that. The video went a little bit longer than I thought it would, but that's all we're doing on this today.